Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Musical Prisms podcast. My name is Wayne, and I am here today with Cody Brockway of Brockway's Vinyl Bites.
Right
And
here in the
today,
Antarctic, baby.
today we're going to be talking about Awake by Dream Theater. So, for you guys who might not have heard, might not have been following along on social media, Cody had a great big announcement last week. Him
Ah,
and guest regular Tara are engaged to be married. So congratulations.
thank you, thank you. Yes, we're officially fiancés, and we're ready to take the next step together. And she loves
Perfect.
Dream Theater too.
I would hope so, because
Oh,
when you call yourself the Prog couple, you at least hope they like the Prog.
oh yeah, absolutely. And we got a new show coming up on Prog Radio too. Thursdays at 12 noon Eastern. We've the Prog couple takes over the Prog Radio waves too, so that'll be fun. ProgRadio.com.
Perfect. Also, check out Cody on deepnuggetsradio.com. He's a regular there every Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern.
8 p.m. Eastern at deepnuggets.com. Yeah, you got it, man. Thank you. Thank you. I do a 3-hour show over there. That's a solo. Sometimes she joins me for that. Sometimes it's solo. It's mostly solo, but we have a good time.
Perfect. So, first question I have to ask you, Cody, how did you discover this album by Dream Theater?
Well, a couple years ago, I was in a band that was I had been aware of Dream Theater for a long time, but coming into this album, it wasn't like one of the first ones I heard or anything like that. But I was in a band that was super into Dream Theater. Obviously, I'm not in that band anymore, but I had started hearing Dream Theater stuff come up on my phone and then them talking about it. And like I said, I had been aware of Dream Theater. I had heard them. The first record I ever heard from Dream Theater was the self-titled one from 2013, not their best album. So I didn't go diehard, 10 years ago when I heard that. But in the last 4 or 5 years or whatever, I started being more aware of their music and started hearing more of it. And then I just became totally obsessed around 2021, 2022. Um, Became full on obsessed with their catalog and just dove into everything, and went and listened to all their albums pretty much. And this happened to be one of them, and I love it. It's I just love how it contrasts, because it came right after Images and Words, right? And so yeah, I just from plunging into the band, I became very aware of this record and its brilliance.
Okay, so I'll go through a little bit of history of this album. It was released October 4th, 1994. Its genres are progressive rock and progressive metal. This is the final album to feature Kevin Moore on the keyboards, who would
Yeah.
leave during the mixing of this album. One thing I found fascinating, the label wanted this to be a more metal-oriented album with hope it would be easier to market and more radio-friendly. But I'm looking at the 1990s as it was not a great time for metal or at all. Like if you weren't grunge or if you weren't Pantera or even at some points in that Metallica or Megadeth, you weren't selling anything around this time. So I just found that very weird that they
Right.
wanted to make it a more metal album than maybe a more rock album.
Well, it probably depends on the label that they were signed to, because there was a lot of good metal bands in the 90s, but like you had Korn, which was its own subgenre in and of
Yeah.
itself, and they were huge. Korn was huge, and then Slipknot would come out, but again, that was 99. And so, but 94, yeah, I guess, because, well, 94, you still would have had Pantera, like you said, doing Far Beyond Driven, and, Metallica, Black Album just out a few years ago prior to that point. But yeah, 90s was kind of a weird point where there was metal, but then there was also a lot of R&B and, Boys to Men and all that stuff. And so, but Headbangers Ball was still a thing.
Not for very much longer if anybody TV had anything to say about that. Uh,
But these guys got in the door there with
yeah.
that. Yeah.
The singles for the album was Lie, Caught in a Web, and The Silent Man for this
Yeah.
album. really good. The album peaked at number 32 on the album charts.
That's
One
pretty.
thing I noticed about this album is the bass is a lot more prominent on
Mhm.
this album than a lot of Dream Theater albums. Like, you really hear John Mayung's bass. And from reading up on it a little bit, even James and a lot of the band members said around this time, John Mayung was a lot more out of his shell and a lot more vocal about what he wanted
Right, right.
on the
And so
album.
when he became less vocal, they turned him down.
Yeah, it's like, yeah, Mike's like, I want my drum sound a little bit more, a little louder, a little louder, a little louder, to the point where you can't really hear John over the kick drum.
Well, you can
Oh,
hear it now pretty good on Parasomnia, the brand new one for the viewers if you haven't heard that yet. Brand new out, very good record. And he's back up in the mix and his tone is really good too. So yeah, but yeah, this album, amazing.
so the themes of the album are deteriorating friendships and changes, anti-conformity, mental illness, communication breakdowns, alcoholism, and depression.
Like a
I
Pink
know,
Floyd album.
kind of in a way. I know Mike mentioned that he was really dealing with his alcoholism around this time and trying to get that under control, which would become a theme later on a lot of Dream Theater albums, which I guess is called the 12 Steps.
Yeah. Glass Prison and This Dying Soul and Repentance, Root of All Evil, and Shattered Fortress. That's
Yeah.
like the six pieces of the 12-step suite.
Yeah. Talking about Kevin Moore, the band said after Images and Words, Kevin Moore got a lot more distant from the band, where they even commented like parts where he would be more involved. He was just sitting there reading a magazine the whole time and not really having any input.
Right.
But a lot of the band members kind of chalked it up to they wanted to go one direction, Kevin Moore wanted to go a different direction, and it was kind of like the whole, well, this just isn't going to work
Yeah.
going
Yeah.
forward. Which is the great part about it. We got Space Divest from this, which was pretty much brought in as a complete song by Kevin Moore.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
that's his sort of piece de resistance, right? That's his baby, right?
yeah.
You know, he wrote the lyrics to "Pull Me Under."
No, I remember. I think it was Scott Davis I was talking to a while back said that the pretty much the main lyricist in the band was Kevin Moore for a while.
At that
Or he
point,
was at that point, and that it kind of like with him kind of stepping back, and that allowed Petrucci to get more songwriting. Not sure lyrical, but I do believe so. John Mayung wrote a song on this album from a poem he had wrote.
yeah. Petrucci now actually writes most of their lyrics.
Oh
Um,
wow!
Onward from, say Scenes from a Memory or something like that. Like he wrote most of that album, not all of it. Obviously, Portnoy was heavy in the lyrics. James Labrie wrote stuff. John Mayung wrote stuff, but it's mostly John Petrucci.
Wow!
Yeah.
Learn something new every day. Mike Portnoy dedicated this album to Frank Zappa, who died in December 1993. This
Yeah.
was their first album after he cited him as a huge influence. And I think this started then the Dream Theater going back and doing medleys of all these other classic prog bands.
If you listen to the song Take the Time on Images and Words, and some people might not have picked up on this because it's a very fleeting moment. But if you listen before James comes in, there's a voice that goes, "Wait a minute." And in the verse before James goes, "Let me catch my breath." That's a sample from Frank Zappa from Dancing Fool when he goes, "Wait a minute, I've got it, you're an Italian." But they stole that one clip of him going, "Wait a minute," before James's vocal comes in on that song, the previous record. I hope Frank got to hear that in his lifetime, because that's a pretty cool homage to him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And for the tour, Derek Sherinian was hired to play on the tour and became a full-time member in 1995 and going forward until Scenes from a Memory.
Yeah. Well, he was only on Falling into Infinity, and then there was some sort of issue, and he was let go from the band, and then Jordan Scenes, Jordan Rudess comes in from there.
Okay. So that's the history of the album. One thing I definitely noticed about this record that I love, this to me might be my favorite James LaBrie vocal performance album. Where I know with I was reading a little bit into this, where the label wanted him to kind of embrace like the grunge vocals, but also metal, and you kind of hear it where he's on here, but he fits that so well. Like, he does such a good job with it.
I agree with you. This is kind of like the pinnacle of that. He really has the rasp and the anger. He has kind of all the emotions going on here, and this is like, as far as it, this is a very dark album. And his voice on this record really reflects that energy, and it really gives it that extra punch in the gut,
Yeah, like, I was listening to this and I'm like, because we did do for Scott's the Prog Corner, we did do like that top 10 Dream Theater songs, and I over the time kind of went through all of that, and this album, I feel, is kind of that different album in the entire catalog, where it was like a very lot more rock, to the point where they dialed back a little bit of the prog, but I think it really works here for this album. And
and you get those proggy elements anyway with stuff like Erotomania and the longer tracks like Space Divest or Voices or Scarred. This is a very consistent listen, and some of the lyrics on this, like the lyrics in Lifting Shadows off of Dream, is just beautiful. Do you mind if I read a little bit of the lyrics in this?
No, go ahead.
He seems alone and silent. Thoughts remain without an answer. Afraid and uninvited, he slowly drifts away, moved by desire and fear, breaking delicate wings, lifting shadows off a dream once broken. She can turn a drop of water into an ocean. As the rain is pouring down, tears of sorrow wash his mind. Drifting with the current, the stream of his life flows on. He seems alone and silent, waiting on his hands and knees. The chill of winter's darkness sits quietly, moved by desire and fear. He takes a few steps away, lifting shadows off a dream once broken. She can turn a drop of water into an ocean. Gorgeous lyrics in that.
Yes.
Wow. And who wrote that? That's lyrics by John Mayung.
Yep.
There
he
you go.
wrote it from a poem. And
yeah, that's what you said.
Yeah, and I was reading on it, and at first they were practicing it that night, and John Petrucci thought the whole thing sounded like crap and didn't even want to think about it until he came in the next day, went back to listen to it, and completely changed his mind.
That's funny how that happens. The first impression is not always the proper one.
No, and I think for the album, I think it really helped the album going forward that it was on there, because I think there is some really good lyrics on this album.
There is, and that's sort of like a lighter song. And then this album is sort of, you get the Caught in the Webs and the Mirror, with that Pantera sort of dun 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 dun. That riff always kind of reminded me of the Pantera song Domination, but they don't keep it that way for that long, because he starts off with that and he keeps the riff going, but then the Kevin Moore keyboards come in and Mike Portnoy for the first 2 minutes of the song plays every beat displacement groove that he can play with the riff staying the freaking same until the pre-verse or whatever. But just the musicianship on this, like every Dream Theater album, is off the charts. And but The Mirror is always a standout track to me. That's just amazing.
Yeah, I like that suite they had from Erotomania, I believe was in that. Just gonna pull it up here.
Yeah,
Erotomania, Voices, and the Silent Man.
Yeah, that's a great 1, 2, 3 punch, right?
Yeah, because I think it was always meant to be a suite, and because of it, you don't kind of want to do the prog thing. Break it off here, break this off here, break this off here. But then probably when they performed it live, they'd probably perform it all as one.
Yeah, I know anytime I play these on the radio stations, it's always Erotomania and Voices and The Mirror and Lie. Like, these songs go together. There's no way around it. I don't split up these tracks. They play as they're supposed to play, as the band created it, and that's
I think Lie. I think James Labrie said, I don't know if it's The Mirror or Lie. I can't remember which one, but I know one of them he said he heard as one song, like he thought it was good enough to stand alone as one track.
It was probably those two songs put together. Yeah. Oh wait, no. So you're saying he heard either one or two of those parts?
Yeah, that one could stand alone.
I think it might have been The Mirror then, because if you look at the set list for what they're doing now, they're playing The Mirror with just like a snippet of Lie, but they're doing The Mirror in full.
Yeah, because I think he said he heard that groove. He really, really loved the groove in that song, and that's what
it's killer.
Because he was like, "Yeah, I gotta listen to this. We gotta do this. We gotta do this." And
a lot of this album stays pretty regular in their set list. Like, the first time I saw them was in 2023. Mike Mangini was on the drums, and they played "Caught in a Web," and then now going to see them in 2-3 weeks in Toronto, and they got The Mirror that's in the set. One song that they haven't played, and I've looked, one song that they have not played in 19 years, which is 2006, if you can believe that was 19 years ago. I certainly can't, but whatever. Innocence Faded.
Yes.
They haven't played that live in nearly 2 decades.
And again, that was the second part to 6 o'clock. That's the third song. That's the third song. That's right.
Yeah, it comes after. So 6 o'clock. We got to talk about 6 o'clock here for a second, folks. Just you put the CD in, the disc here, or you put the vinyl on, whatever you got. Oh Jesus! You put the vinyl on, and immediately you got this rototom drum fill.
Yeah.
That is so classic. That is just awesome. And that groove was actually, because that song was mostly, I think Kevin Moore had the idea for that song. And that groove that Mike plays there is pretty much the groove that was actually from the drum machine, but Mike just translated it into his own personality.
Wow.
And played the groove that was on the demo tape that Kevin gave them.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah, at 6 o'clock, what an absolute banger. I love that there's a lyric in this that goes, "Melody walks through the door and memory flies out the window." Mike would have a daughter like 2 or 3 years later named Melody Portnoy. And so I can't help but feel like he named her after the lyric in that song. I could be wrong about that, but but we were talking about Innocence Faded. For some reason, there's a couple of cuts that just don't make the live sets. Maybe it's to do with certain melodies or things like that, or maybe it's just, I really don't know why they haven't pulled that out in so many years, because they constantly go back to this record.
Yeah, well, maybe Mike Portnoy hasn't been making the set list for a while, so that could be, because I know Sea of Tranquility talked about how he was notorious for just every set list being different for each concert. And that could be one of those where it's like, I understand why it would be like, no, we're not doing that anymore.
Yeah, they've like even now that he's back, they let him pick the set list, but they've been consistent in keeping the set list almost the same for most of these legs. Like the European tour, now that they're doing North America, they've changed a couple of songs, especially with the release of Parasomnia. But I could see them going back once they get comfortable playing live together again after one or two tours. I could see them going back and going, okay, let's just throw in, I don't know, Surrounded or something different, right?
Yeah, this album, like, I love this album because it kind of feels like they reined John Petrucci in a little bit. Like from what he would do later, it kind of feels like this is like a focused John Petrucci, if that makes sense. Sure. Where it's not like going all over the place. It's like, this is the song. This is kind of like, yeah, you get your riffs and all that stuff, but his soloing is so, I feel it packs more of a punch that way with this album.
Thinking about guitar solos, yeah, you're on something there. Because I was just listening to Scarred before we came on here, and the guitar playing in that is just out of this world. But he's like in the higher echelon of guitar players for me. He's like so many records, like Scenes from a Memory, Train of Thought, and even the new one. Like his guitar playing is just, and his lyric writing has always been really, really well. Like some people understand, like you and me, but not everyone understands that, even Dream Theater, with all the technical proficiency, even going on here, the song always came first, right? Yeah. So there's always songs that are, even with the technical and insane bits, those are placed inside the songs. Like the songs aren't based around that. Those are worked within the song itself. And so, yeah, they're really masterful at like, they kind of have their own style. People have tried to sound like them, but it's like there is one Dream Theater. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I like it because it feels like his just normal, what I'd say, quote unquote, classic rock guitar style tone is just so good on this, especially on Scarred, where you can really hear it just come through. And when it happens, it's like that climax of the song where you're like, yes, that's what I've been waiting for.
You're so right, man. His guitar playing and the sound of his guitar on this record, and that song in particular, is just awesome. You're so right.
Yeah. Oh man, Kevin Moore's keyboards. Like I know he's not like, quote unquote, the technical maestro of Jordan Rudess. I know other people have said Derek Sherinian might be the best keyboard player they've ever had. But for me, there's something about Kevin Moore on this album that fits.
Right.
Band.
Yeah, I mean, in particular for this time and what they were writing at the time. I mean, now I love Jordan Rudess so much. It would be kind of hard to imagine them without him now. But for this period of the band, yeah, I mean, especially with that early formation and Kevin being an original member, he really serves the records that he's on. And even when the other guys would start sort of taking over and taking it to a different direction, he still had these, he still had ways to put himself in there and fill up his space just perfectly without, stepping on anyone's toes or anything. He's a very good musician, and you don't really hear much from him going on anymore.
Yeah, which is kind of sad because I know it said, like, they said pretty much after this thing, he packed up in his van and toured or just drove across America. That's really all he wanted to do. And then began writing more solo work.
I also heard that he became like someone in the medical field. I could be
Okay.
wrong about that. I really don't know. All I know is that they've got Jordan Rudess now, and that's a totally fine choice because that guy is
Insane.
if you follow him on Instagram or any of his social media, I mean, he used to go on Instagram Live and he would just set the phone up on his piano and he would just play like these little concertos completely by himself. And the stuff he can do, he's like the modern day Keith Emerson, Jordan Rudess is.
Yeah.
Just the stuff he can play without even thinking about it. His eyes are closed and he's swaying and just his hands going all over the keyboard, like, but just flowing perfectly. It's like, come on, man. Come
Yeah.
on.
I think I read somewhere where he was the key. Him and Jan Hammer worked together on stuff, and I'm like, if you're good enough to play with Jan Hammer,
Yeah,
you're really good. And
yeah. I mean, Jordan's done stuff on Steven Wilson records too, and he's done stuff. Obviously, the Liquid Tension Experiment stuff is also, I mean, if you think about where this happened, 1994. And then they would do Falling Into Infinity with Derek Sherinian in 1997. But then they would also sort of split off and do the Liquid Tension stuff. So Liquid Tension Experiment is where they indoctrinated Jordan into Dream Theater. So they got the first two Liquid Tensions, I think, came out in 97, 98, in Dream Theater's sort of downtime, if you will. And so you got Tony Levin, just for the people that are watching that may not know. Tony Levin, Mike Portnoy, John Petrucci, and Jordan Rudess. It's all instrumental insanity, right? and they had wanted Jordan in because Jordan, I believe, was in a band that was opening for Dream Theater during the time of Awake. And they had wanted Jordan in since even before Derek Sherinian came.
Wow.
And so, but they didn't get Jordan. And Derek Sherinian is a hell of a keyboardist. He really is. I mean, that Sons of Apollo stuff, Planet X, all of his, wow, he's amazing. But they wanted Jordan in for a long time. They had known him. So then they're like, okay, well, we'll do this project. And then so once they started writing together with the Liquid Tension stuff, then it's like, okay, yeah, now I'll join Dream Theater.
Yeah, like even then you get Transatlantic out of that and the many Mike Portnoy's side projects.
Transatlantic is one of the best bands of all time. I absolutely love them. Do you like them, Wayne?
I've heard one album. I think it's what is it? Their first album?
Simpty.
Yeah. And I know because Scott sent it to me and said, listen to this and all that stuff. I think he sent me a Flower Kings album called The Sum of All Evil or something.
Oh, yeah. I got that one right here.
Yeah, and it's like, wow, with Transatlantic, you get like the Flower Kings, you get Dream Theater, you get Neil Morse, I believe, is in that too. So
yeah,
the magical hippie bus.
Some people might say for the Flower Kings, some people might say that their best record is probably Space Revolver.
Yeah,
but they've got a lot of good albums.
Yeah, you get Liquid Tension Experiment, you get all this stuff. It really is interesting looking at the tentacles of Dream Theater and where they went. Like they're kind of their own tree.
Yeah, they are. They kind of pulled a Yes, didn't they?
Yeah.
They kind of pulled a Yes where every member was part of something. I mean, John Mayung did some side stuff with groups like the Jelly Jam and stuff like that. But really, if you look at the grand scope, Jordan Rudess has done a killer thing on his own. Like he does, I've known a couple of covers that he's done. He did a cover of Dance on a Volcano with Neil Morse. He did Tarkus from Emerson, Lake and Palmer, Steven Wilson on that. James has had some pretty good solo albums.
Yeah.
John Petrucci has probably had the best solo albums. But then Mike, with all these other bands, he never did any solo albums, but he did all this, the Sons of Apollo, Metal Allegiance, Winery Dogs, Transatlantic, and the Transatlantic albums are just Absolutely fantastic. And Transatlantic would start after Dream Theater. We're getting a bit off topic here, but
Yeah.
they'd start after the Scenes tour in 2000. But this is kind of when Dream Theater would have been touring with Spock's Beard and groups like that. So this is kind of the culprit and the culmination of how the band would later meet Jordan Rudess and Neil Morse and all these different people.
Yeah.
Is the Awake tour. So it all comes back to this, really.
Yeah, it's kind of like the entry point for all the insanity starts kind of right here after this.
Yeah. And I like how the album cover seems to connect with a lot of the songs on the record.
Yeah, their artist said that they were very specific about what they wanted on the album cover. And I want to say that they wanted kind of like stock photos and stuff, or I can't remember if he said they wanted that, or he just got so out of time that he had to start throwing in photos and stuff. But it's a really interesting album cover. Like, you don't really think about it for the 90s anymore. Like, most album covers were kind of being scaled back because of CD.
Yeah, and the things were different, especially with vinyl wasn't really much of a thing anymore. But these guys were relics in that regard, in the sense that the art was, still meant to be taken in as a whole with the album cover and everything. I mean, if you look at the clock on the cover here, the time points to 6 o'clock.
6 o'clock. Yeah.
And there's a mirror here for the mirror. There's the Silent Man in the mirror. There's the Dream Theater logo there. And there's other there's caught in a web right here with the spider, so it really connects with a lot of the songs on the record, and I think that's really cool to do something like that.
Yeah, their artist said they're very persistent about it and about what they wanted on there, and ended up with that. And I think it's a really good album cover.
Yeah.
The only two Dream Theater album covers I don't really like is, I believe it's 6 Degrees of Inner Turbulence.
Yeah.
Has kind of a bland album cover, and the Dream Theater self-titled. I believe it's just the logo.
Yeah. It's like a moon. It's like the dark side of the moon.
Yeah.
But not like the album cover, but it's actually like it's on the moon with their logo. Yeah, that's not my favorite album. Even the Mangini era produced better records than that. Although that one's a fine one. It's and this album, the album cover sounds like the album. When you listen to the record, you can feel the cover really connecting with the music, and that is so important.
Yeah, going back to previous podcast, I feel the same way about Yes's Tales from Topographic Oceans, where the album cover completely fits the mood of that album.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with you. Yeah, totally. I love that album cover so much that if you actually come into my record store in Caledonia, Ontario, Second Chance Records, upon the cashier desk at the front, I actually have the Tales album cover painted on the bottom of the desk. And instead of it saying, it says Yes, but it also says Second Chance Records.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Pretty cool. It's got the whole gatefold painted. It's really cool, actually. It's nice.
Yeah. So if you had to give this album a grade out of 10, what would you give it?
That's a hard question for me, because I do like the album a lot. It isn't my favorite Dream Theater album, but I don't know if I could give it any less than a 9.
Yeah.
Like, it's a very good album, and I'm looking at the songs. That's why the cover's sideways. I'm looking at the tracks. Yeah, I'd say, depending on the day, a 9 or a 10 for me. Because it is a very consistent album. It's a very good listen. It's very heavy, and it's Images and Words. I probably listen to that one more, because I really like both those records, though. but the way they contrast each other is also very cool. So yeah, I'll settle with a 9 for today, but tomorrow it could be a 10. How about you?
Oh man, this one for me is like I think 8.5. There's just some parts of it where I'm like, just very nitpicking for me, but I agree with you. It's very, very consistent, at least for me.
Yeah.
Like I'm not anyone who knows I'm not the biggest Dream Theater fan, but for me, this album is right up there with. I think because it's so consistent and
Right.
it's a lot more songwriter at points oriented. It still has instrumentals, but it's not where it would go later, where it just went kind of insane.
Also, it has the benefit of having stuff like more ballady sides of things, so it can sort of contrast with the heaviness, right? And that's what I was hoping for with Parasomnia, is that we would get another ballad, and we did with Bend the Clock. I'm so happy. I love that song. But on this, you get The Silent Man and Innocence Faded, which are probably the most two ballady songs on the album. And you don't really need more than two. It's just kind of perfect because they're such good writers. And the fact that they grew up on all the same music that you and I listen to all the time. And so they know how to make an album that flows, just like Pink Floyd did, just like Rush did, just like all these classic bands did. And so they could take that and put their own spin on it. And so all these records, all their records have a certain flow to them.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
Yeah, it's a great record. Definitely suggest if you're getting into Dream Theater, this might be a great place to start.
Yeah.
For a newbie, where it's not quite the over the top instrumentation, where it is rooted a lot more in quote unquote normal structured songs.
Right.
But still has a little bit of adventurous to it. So it's not like completely out of the ordinary, but it's a really good record. Like I'd definitely suggest this to people.
Wayne, what are your top 5 Dream Theater albums?
Oh man, I'd have to go back and look at all of them. I definitely say this would be in like my top 3.
It's a very good one.
I think
for sure.
This one, Scenes from a Memory, Metropolis Part 2, that one's pretty good. The other one, I'd have to go and listen to the rest of the catalog to see what's in there, because I know there's some where I kind of think Dream Theater is this way. Like they're great. They would be a great study for greatest hits band. Like, what's their greatest hits album?
Well, they do have one. Oh, you mean like for a studio?
Yeah.
That it's probably if it comes down in terms of popularity of individual tracks, it's probably Scenes or Images and Words. Yeah. But fan favorites, Train of Thought is a heavy fan favorite. Octavarium, Black Clouds is one of my top Dream Theater albums. Black Clouds, Silver Linings. Then all the Mangini records like Distance Over Time, View from the Top of the World. Those are my 2 favorite Mangini records. But and then of course Parasomnia it's really like, I like how it connects to Black Clouds and sort of has a Train of Thought vibe, but very modern at the same time. It's very good and worth the listen. As is Awake, folks. Are you awake? We are, and we're having a great
time. Well, anyway, once again, Cody, thank you for doing this with me. Great to have you on again. Hope to have you on again in the future. Coming up, to anyone who doesn't know, there's a lot of great albums going to be discussed. Whether it be with Tara, we're going to be talking about Back on the Streets with Gary Moore. Me and Tom Curlis are going to be talking about Arthur or the Decline and Fall of the British Empire by the Kinks is one. Myself and Scott Davis going to be discussing Heaven and Hell by Black Sabbath.
Love that record.
One question I wanted to ask you, Cody, what do you think of the new Black Sabbath kind of end date concert, where it's really going to be Sabbath, but Ozzy's going to have like very minimal,
expensive,
very expensive.
expensive. No, that's a good question because, it's on the other side of the world from where we are. They're going to be doing it out in the UK. I think it's in London, right, where they're from.
Birmingham, I think.
Yeah. So right, exactly. Yeah. They kind of labeled it as the Black Sabbath Final Goodbye, even though they did the End tour back about 10 years ago. And then after, but they were pretty upfront about, having, Mastodon, Metallica, Lamb of God, all these other bands that Black Sabbath inspired. But people kind of got this notion that Black Sabbath was going to be doing the sort of a grand goodbye. And then it came out after people bought the tickets that, oh, Ozzy's not doing a full set. So it's like, oh, so the people that bought the tickets and were expecting to see Sabbath, I mean, hey, you get Metallica, you get all these other amazing bands, so it's still a great bang for your buck, right? Because there's like 20 other bands playing with them or something like that. I think it's cool for a celebration of the genre, because those guys are kind of known as the guys who sort of created it in a sense.
Yeah.
And so to have all the people that they influenced and sold millions of records and all these amazing bands, it'll be like a cool festival type thing. It's just unfortunate that most people were expecting to see more of Sabbath and they're not going to get that.
My question would be is if you're going to do it at that point, what, like, have Ozzy sing like a couple songs, but bring back Tony Martin, because he is really their only singer left.
Yeah, I mean Ian Gillan, but no one likes that record really anyway. So
yeah, and by that point he was already well established with Deep Purple.
Oh yeah.
So, but I could really see Tony Martin, because he took the mantle in the 80s when Sabbath was kind of at their low point. And I think those Tony Martin records, other than Forbidden, were actually pretty good.
Yeah. And the Dio records, I mean, rest in peace, Ronnie James Dio, but they're just Heaven and Hell, Mob Rules, Dehumanizer. A lot of people don't know that record, Dehumanizer, and then the Heaven and Hell record that they renamed the band in 2009 or whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, it should be a good show. I mean, anything Metallica's playing at, it's going to be a good concert.
Yeah, I think definitely for Sabbath, or like it's a good send off. I think Ozzy's had his time where it would be good to give Tony Martin that accolade for his time in Sabbath, because I'll go on the record, I love what is it? The Eternal Idol, the Headless Cross, Tear. I like those records.
Yeah.
I know they came out with the box set last year for a lot of them, and they sound great.
Yeah, pretty good stuff. Pretty good stuff. Maybe some of the Sabbath guys will also probably feature with other bands on the bill.
Yeah, that'd be pretty cool, because I know Tony Iommi has like a gazillion riffs on tape somewhere that he always talks about, where he has like riffs for days, where he was just creating riff after riff after riff.
Oh yeah.
And I'd love to see it. The next Black Sabbath compilation thing or box set, the Tony Iommi riff machine.
That'll be awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for having me on, man. I really appreciate it. Always nice to be here and chatting with you about this amazing music.
Yeah, not a problem. Like I said, definitely love to have you on again. Got Amy Fox coming up with Zeppelin 2 as well in the future. Kevin Carmody has agreed to be on in the future from Prog Radio, so that should be fun. I'll reach out again to him and see which album he wants to do. But anyway, to all of you who have continued to watch and are still here, thank you so much. For those of you listening, thank you. Once again, great time. Thank you all for being here. This is me here signing off. Peace.
Rock on.